Dr. Karl Kapp, thank you so much for being here. Dr. Karl Kapp is a professor of instructional technology at Bloomberg University. He is an expert in the field of e-learning, corporate training, and ERP. He has been interviewed by magazines such as Software Strategies, Knowledge, Distance Learning, Training, and many others. He has written dozens of articles, and specifically I want to call out the book of Learning in 3D. He's the author of that book along with Tony O'Driscoll. This book is a phenomenal book, and I am not getting any commissions to push this book, but please consider accessing it, buying it, however you can get your hands on. It is a masterpiece on how learning and business can be done in the new world of 3D. And we're going to be using this book to talk about the archetypes in the next 2 courses that Randy will teach us. So Dr. Karl Kapp is a visionary on a future of technology, learning, and business operations. He has been a software editor of Manufacturing Trade Journal, and he has been an evaluator of 2 advanced technology education grants by NSF. I want to welcome you, Dr. Kapp, to our program. I know you are a few hours ahead of us, and so this really means a lot, and thank you very much. Let's move ahead with our program. Before I turn the floor to Dr. Kapp, let me just tell you what the structure of this interview is. We have so much to cover. Basically, we have 4 areas. One is we're going to, I just want to do a courtesy check. Please slap me a Y if you can still hear me. If I sound good, am I good? Perfect. Thank you. Number 1 area would be how to start up a virtual world company. We'll ask some questions around that. The second area would be what are the trends and transformations that are happening in the virtual world. I'm sorry, the one after that would be how to make money in virtual world. So first one is how to start up, what does it take to start up a virtual world company? Second is the nitty-gritty of making money. Third is trends and transformations, and fourth is Q&A. So let me start by asking you, Dr. Karl, let's dissect this virtual economy that we have in front of us. What are some of the hot and upcoming businesses? What are some of these business categories? What are the key roles that these businesses require? So please, Dr. Karl.
Okay, thanks. I think there's several ways to look at monetizing the virtual world. If you think from a corporate standpoint, well, let's back up. So there's certainly ways to do consumer-to-consumer corporate or consumer-to-consumer ways of earning money in a virtual world. So that's the creation of virtual goods. And the virtual good market is literally a billion-dollar industry in terms of looking at just beyond Second Life, but looking into things such as Eve, EverQuest, World of Warcraft, and those types of virtual worlds as well, and looking into the proliferation of virtual worlds. So one thing is to set up items that most people in the virtual world don't know how to create or make. So that's the model that I'm sure you're all familiar with, Ines Chung, who was basically a real estate developer in a virtual world. So you can extend that to the real estate element. But if you look at corporate market, what happened is there was a lot of hype, especially around Second Life, and corporations jumped into Second Life and they said, this is great, we're going to have all kinds of stuff, and they got in and they found out, oh, wait a minute, there's nothing here. We have to build it ourselves. And I think that took a lot of corporations back because It was kind of like buying a learning management system and then finding out, oh, by the way, now you've got to create courses. So I think there's a huge marketing, and some companies like 2B3D are tapping into that, which helping corporations understand how to create meaning in the virtual world and how to create engagement in the virtual world. I think companies that create engagement, that create reasons to come to the virtual world, will be successful. So right now, companies, the first blush, companies came in, they said, oh, isn't this cool? Let's make some tennis shoes, or let's make some cars, and people will find out about our brand and then love it. But actually what happened was people came in and they said, well, there's nothing going on here. I'm not engaged. There's not a market for this stuff. But companies that are in helping other companies engage in that market, finding out what's going on, will be very successful. And so what we're finding is, especially in more of the corporate-based virtual worlds, in that the companies are creating software to leverage collaboration. So they'll say, look, you've got people all over the world. We're not going to collaborate over WebEx anymore. That's too boring and static. Let's collaborate where we can actually build something together. So I see 3 industries in virtual worlds emerging. The first industry is one, and I'm going to name some names here. VenueGen, for example, is using their virtual world platform to replace WebEx-type communications. They're saying, look, don't do the same boring 2D stuff. Come in and do that. Right, there's no sense of presence. So they're using that sense of presence and using avatars that really look like the individual to draw people in. Then there are companies like SAIC that bought Forterra and their product Olive. And what they're doing is they're creating multi-learner scenarios. So it used to be you'd go through a scenario on your own, do some things on your own, and learn that way. But now they're saying, hey, we need first responders all working together. Let's have them work together in a virtual world. So they're creating multi-learner virtual simulations. And then the third, and I think to me one of the more interesting categories, and where Second Life I think started to go but didn't go there completely, is what Protosphere is doing, and they're creating an enterprise-wide portal for the organization. So they've linked with Microsoft's Link capability, Microsoft's SharePoint capability, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to be the portal to the enterprise. So you go into that virtual world and you meet up with virtual colleagues, but then you can pull in a SharePoint document, or then you can do social networking within that world and find out that somebody knows something that you need to know in that company. The two of you can res together, then you can start prototyping something together and working together all in this virtual environment. So those are 3 markets that I see, and then companies that create content for those virtual worlds I think are very, very important. And then another interesting marketplace that's developing is metrics for a virtual world. So if I've got all these people in this virtual world and they're collaborating and working together, how can I measure that what they're doing is of value? And then, as Randy talks about, in terms of the consumer market, creating products and goods for people that are newer to these virtual worlds, I think are very important. And I think there's going to be, based on the double happiness genes factory kind of model, where you are going to be able to create kind of peer-to-peer. You're going to be able to create products in a virtual world, and then those products are going to be able to be actualized in the physical world. So, for example, if you go to the Double Happiness Genes Factory, which typically is set up at Sundance film festivals and other places, you can go into an island in Second Life, a manufacturing plant, watch your genes that you order go from workstation to workstation. So at one, they're going to put in, kind of the acid wash look. One, they'll do bell bottoms or straight bottoms. One's for the pocket. And at the end of that process, it actually prints out on an actual printer with canvas-like material a pair of jeans in the physical world. And you're going to be able to put on the jeans, you can put on the jeans and wear them. And I think that there's going to be a lot of that peer-to-peer creation of virtual goods that you'll be able to trade with people, and that you'll be able to exchange with people. And I think that's kind of an interesting idea. When you can make an avatar, and Land's End already does this, you can make an avatar that has your same measurements, your skin tone, your hair color. You can certainly build that in a world like Second Life, and then you could go shopping with your friends that live across the world and try on an outfit, and they say, hey, Karl, that looks great on you. Purple's your color. And then all of a sudden, I can click, and it'll have all my credit card information, and I'll be able to buy that item right then and there. And the next day, it's shipped to my house, or in the futures, I believe we'll all have miniature printers in our home that'll print in plastic, that will print in glass, that will print in materials, and they'll print out in our room the things that we've bought. So I think that's kind of a broad swath, if you will, of where things are going. And I saw someone asking about, I think it was Marty asking about the metrics. I think companies that can help organizations figure out the action and behaviors as a result of what they're doing in the virtual world. So for example, if I put some first responders together and I give them some orders and maybe I bark out the orders, well, I can watch how those people react. But maybe next time, instead of barking out the orders, I kind of give them a more conversational tone and see, you know, what's the reaction there. And by measuring the time response, the movement of the avatar, measuring the behaviors and the actions that they take, I can start to mine some data about human behavior. So how marketers want to mine us, you know, where we go, what books we look on Amazon and all that kind of stuff. What's really going to be interesting is if we can map behaviors in the virtual world back to the physical world. And there's already some really interesting studies out of Stanford that say that what we are doing in terms of virtual world activities are not dissimilar to what we do in physical world activities. There was actually a really interesting research study that had fifth graders. Some fifth graders were male who entered the virtual world as female. Some were female who entered the virtual world as male. And they found out that even though these fifth grade males were in the persona of a female avatar, they were acting like fifth grade males. They were doing the same aggressive behavior. They were the same type of chat, the same physical location, and the girls were the same thing. They were clustering. They were more social. They were less aggressive. And so very easy to see how our behaviors intermix in the physical and the virtual world. And then they even did this study that showed that taller avatars, so you may want to change the height of your avatar, actually they had taller avatars and shorter avatars, and the taller avatars actually negotiated more aggressively than the shorter avatars. And then in world. And then they took these people out of world and had them in a negotiating situation and found out that the behavior of the taller avatars, now this was shortly after, but the behavior of the taller avatars impacted, they were more aggressive negotiators in the real world as well. I mean, think of the implications of some of that stuff. And then one more thing, and then I'll go back because I know I'm on a tangent. But the studies of 3D versus third person versus first person. And the really interesting thing is that they find that behavior change results more when someone observes themselves in third person than in first person. And they actually have done some researches that show that with galvanic skin responses, that people that watch themselves do things in third person tend to actually have a bigger reaction than going through an experience in first person in a kind of a virtual environment. So I think that's really kind of interesting as well. So that's a long answer, I guess, to the different companies, but that's kind of where I see the industry.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the details on the what is the virtual economy? The thing that was really chilling, based on what you said, was this notion of blending the virtual world with the real world in terms of taking, going from mass production to peer-to-peer production, and this whole, renaissance of this entire cottage industry where people like hobbyists can create shoes together, design it in virtual world, and really create it in the real world and put on jeans and co-design, and it's just phenomenal. So thank you so much for covering the virtual economy terrain. Just a quick reminder to our audiences that this program is being recorded, both audio, video, and we have one person who's on our team who's taking notes on this. So just wanted to let you know that the recording is being done and it will be available. So if you're taking copious notes, you may continue, but I just wanted to let you know. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Kapp, I'm going to combine the next few questions because I want to stay on time here. And I want to make sure that we get to hear a lot from you. So the next question is around basically starting up a virtual world company. So in terms of how do you actually market? What are the tools for marketing your services? How do you register a company in a virtual world? How do you hire the right people? How do you get paid? That whole, starting up a business 101 type. Can you please share some thoughts on that?
Right. So I think what we need to remember in virtual world, and there's some researches or some resources there, is that we need to think of our virtual world business as a real business. And I say that as a group that's already thinking that way, but a lot of times I'll talk to people and they're kind of setting it up as a hobby, or they're not really serious about it, or if you think of your business as a hobby, you'll always make hobby income. As soon as you start thinking of your business as a business, you'll make business income. So the way to market for a virtual world is where people are interacting in a virtual world. So the first thing you need to do is figure out your clientele. Are your clientele already in the virtual world, or are your clientele outside of the virtual world and you want to pull them into the virtual world? So the first thing is to identify where your clientele are. Once you find out where your clientele are, then you need to focus your advertising efforts there. So if your clientele are in world, then look for in-world publications, in-world blogs, find the opinion leaders in the in-world space and follow them and advertise where they are. So we have all beautiful social media tools that we can use to bring that. And I really believe that social media tools are a real level playing field. They've taken the marketing dollars out of the hands of exclusive advertising agencies and have allowed the common person to create an advertising campaign through the use of YouTube, and then you tweet your YouTube video, and then it shows up on Facebook, and then people like it, and then they put it on Delicious, and then that goes up, and all social bookmarking and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's really a good way to think about marketing your company. Who are you going after? If you're going after people that, for example, are in the training field but aren't into the technology, you need to hit the training magazines, the training publications, the training conferences, those types of things. So I think that's a real way to do it. It's very hard to raise any kind of in-world venture capital, but the out-world venture capital, if you have a projected business revenue stream, you can actually get venture capital now. It's not as tight as it once was. They're just waiting for kind of the right thing. So that's a way that you could get funded. Of course, getting venture capital funding means you're giving up a large part of your business. I think a lot of early movers and shakers in virtual worlds are free thinkers and independent, and so I may shy away from a venture capitalist until I was absolutely sure I wanted to give up control, and even then I'm not sure. that I would want to do that. But so advertise where your audience is. So understand who are your customers, and then understand where they go and advertise where they are. And that's a good way to get started. And then do some things maybe for nonprofits to get your company known. And then exactly same as in the physical world. And then get a customer base, and then leverage those one or two early customers for testimonials into later customers. The other thing I think it's important to understand is that with virtual worlds, because they are relatively new, you have to understand who you're talking to. Are you talking to an innovator or a technology adopter who's kind of likes technology because it's technology, or are you talking to a later stage adopter? And in that case, you have to kind of cross the chasm. You do your marketing message and advertising message if you want the innovative audience one way, hey, this is new, it's cool, nobody else is doing it, competitive advantage, versus the later stage, which, hey, this is a proven technology, people are comfortable with it, here's the case studies, here's the research, here's what people are doing. So you kind of have to know to whom you're speaking with as you position your product. Did I answer all the questions? I don't know I got all of them.
I think you did, and you did really well. So thank you. Let's move on to. So before I move on, I just want to reiterate that if you have any questions, if you can hold off until the Q&A session, that's great. But if you'd like to submit it, please definitely prefix them with the word question. Because there are lots of questions in the chat and it's getting difficult to track them. So please use the word question as prefix in uppercase, followed that by with your question. Thank you. That would make it easy to spot all the questions. Okay, Dr. Kapp, thank you. Let's talk about the hardcore making money in virtual worlds. So let's take the corporate training business. So if I'm starting a corporate training business in virtual world, or let's say it could be like a virtual world consulting, like Randy's 2b3d.net. If I want to start up something like that, so if that's my business, what are I'm going to be pretty straightforward here. What are the top 3 steps to make money in this business? What do I need to do? It could be 3 to 5 things, however you like to specify. But what are, cut to the chase, 3 to 5 things that I need to do to make money in virtual world?
Okay, yeah, good question. Reminds me of the old joke, how do you make, $1 million? Well, first, get $1 million. So the idea, I think virtual worlds, I think there's several places to make money in a virtual world. And from a training standpoint, I think the money right now, or what people understand right now, is taking a simulation and extending the simulation by allowing multiple learners to get into that simulation. So I think, because I always tell people that a virtual world allows for an infinite branching scenario. So when we create like a sales scenario and it's first person and you take it individually, there's 4 choices on the screen. And I say, I wouldn't pick any of those 4 choices. I'd pick choice 5. But because it's already pre-programmed, you have to choose one of those 4 choices. In an environment like this, obviously, we can branch anywhere. I can role play a doctor. You could role play a pharmaceutical sales rep. And no matter what I say, you can come and respond to that. So I think that is a really sweet spot for making multi-learner scenarios, especially in the training field. I think the next area that I see organizations adopting is they're losing the sense of community and collaboration and the sense of presence. I think Marty or Andy or somebody mentioned that earlier, that you don't get in a WebEx, that you don't get in a 2D virtual classroom. So I think virtual events, such as conferences, such as a class meeting like this in a corporate environment, I think tapping that nut in terms of bringing people together in an intimate virtual setting and providing the sense of presence is another market that you can do there. I think you can make a lot of money that way as well. I think the third way, and this way has been for a while but hasn't been collaborative, it is the prototyping of new products. So if you can figure out a way to socialize a prototype, and then you bring the focus group to the prototype, you're able to provide a distributed team with one central location and help create new products faster and more efficiently and that are more designed for the customer. I think that's really a sweet spot to make money in the virtual world as well. And I think finally, from a training standpoint, what I find frustrating is that you get into a virtual world for training and people are reproducing a classroom with virtual PowerPoints and virtual seats and a virtual instructor, which you need some of that, but what really is the next level or the sweet spot from the training standpoint is to recreate an on-the-job situation. So for example, if you're learning in a classroom, there's a lot of cognitive overhead that you have to deal with, like sitting in a straight line, where's the instructor, looking at the PowerPoints that you don't deal with on the job. If you're a factory worker and you're doing something, you're right there at the piece of machinery. You're not looking at an overhead. And the virtual world allows us to put you in that environment, have you do that work in an authentic environment, give you authentic recall cues, and it really allow you to replicate that work very safely. We've always had simulators for life and death experiences, flight simulators, the military. But now we can have simulators for salespeople. We can have simulators for retail people, factory people, anybody we want. And that, I think, is really an interesting learning environment. And finally, an environment, I think somebody's going to do this someday, and maybe somebody in this very, very room. But what's going to happen is there's a 2008 article, Tony, my co-author, co-authored an article in the Harvard Business Review that said basically World of Warcraft was an excellent leadership training simulator because you're leading people that you're not their boss, you're at the same level, you're after a limited amount of goods that are not easily distributed, and yet you all work toward a common goal. And if you could lead in that environment, you could lead in a virtual worldwide corporate environment, and that has to do with gamification too, of learning and business. But I really believe that the answer is going to be somebody is going to create a company to train leaders, and it's all going to be based in World of Warcraft because you have a series of experiences. Or someone very clever will create a series of experiences in Second Life and guide somebody through, or some other virtual world, and guide somebody through that experience and train them to be leaders by actually forcing them to lead, something that doesn't happen a lot in the classroom. And I think that's a sweet spot too.
Excellent. So thank you so much for these powerful insights on how specifically to focus on the virtual world, different types of businesses, and the emerging areas of growth. I do want to ask you, we all are believers in best practices, and let's not repeat the errors of the past. What are some examples of companies who have failed in virtual worlds, and what are some reasons why?
I think the number one, there's some examples there. I think the number one reason why companies failed in Second Life is because they built something and then assumed that people would just come there. And they didn't build in engagement. They built in static. So they took, for example, the concept of an automobile and said, okay, here's an automobile. You can grab the automobile and you can look at it. You can change the color. But they didn't let you drive it lots of different places. They didn't let you experience it in the extreme cold or the extreme hot. They didn't let you, enjoy it. You need to do things like that. The other thing that I think why companies failed in a virtual world is because it's kind of like, I think, I don't know who said this, but basically we overestimate technology in the short run and underestimate it in the long run. I think maybe that was Bill Gates who said that. But these companies overestimated how attractive a single location would be, and they underestimated the power of engagement. So I think that companies that fail to engage their customers in the virtual world failed. And I think the companies used models from the physical world into the virtual world. So, for the first 100 years of motion pictures, all they did was set up the camera and videotaped or taped stage productions. And then we started getting nuances and elements that were specific to film. And then we could do time travel in film, then we could do time shifting in film. And I think virtual worlds are just now starting to get some of the virtual world elements. And when you put these virtual world elements together, that will make them more attractive. So if you want to avoid failure in the virtual world as a business, number one, engage your customers in the virtual world. Have somebody there. Number two, keep changing why they want to come back. If you have the same thing every time, they don't want to come back. So provide new things that they're changing. And three, provide an experience. If you look at consumerism in general, what companies are trying to do and what Starbucks does and other companies is to create experiences. So if everything's a commodity, the only advantage is to create an experience. And I think Second Life gives you that ability to create experiences. Shout out to the Uncle D's Story Quest, but basically that's an experience of walking through somebody's life and almost as a detective figuring out who was this person and how did they live and what were they thinking, and that kind of stuff really I think gives a visceral reaction to people, and that's an excellent way to pull people into experiences. And when we can pull people into experiences, that's going to be a successful company.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This was really insightful, and I have so many other questions, but in the interest of time, let me just ask the last group of questions, and then I want to open it up for Q&A for the audience. So the last set of questions is around one particular thing in the Learning in 3D book. On page 320 and 321, you talk about maturity levels, and specifically working is one of the maturity levels that you talk about, and you alluded to this in the beginning about factory production in virtual world. My question is around trends and transformations in virtual world. So the question is, what is your vision of virtual world in 3 to 5 years? Like, if you were to think out, and I don't want to go deeper than 5 years because things are changing so much. What's your vision of virtual worlds being on steroids? And what are some of the transformations that will happen? And what is the height of virtual world in the 3 to 5 years in your vision? Please, thank you.
Okay, great question. Unfortunately, you said this is going to be recorded, so in 5 years, somebody's going to say, Dr. Kapp was so off of base. But so one trend that I definitely think is going to happen is going to be browser-based virtual worlds. So the download with a thin client, I think there's many organizations working to get away from that. I also know that there's many organizations, or some organizations, working toward an avatar that can go from one virtual world to another virtual world, although I don't know that 5 years will make that. But what I see, I think, in the realm of virtual worlds, I always talk to people about, they say, I don't like virtual worlds. They're hard to navigate, and they're hard to get around, and that kind of stuff. And I say, yeah, I remember about 8 years ago, I was teaching a course, and I would have to say, now this is a browser, and notice the blue underlined word, that's a link. Click on that link, and it'll open another window. And sometimes that window is behind the other window. I don't have to do any of that training anymore. People know how to navigate through the internet. People will learn to navigate in a virtual 3D world. So I think the argument of navigation is going to go away. I also see a blending more of the 2D and 3D web. You're already seeing it in Second Life, where you can bring in different assets and you can interact with them. Not quite seamlessly, but you can interact with them. I think that will get better, and that technology will get better. I think a major company is going to buy into the virtual worlds in a big way. I'm not sure which major company it's going to be. Second Life, I think it actually, there were rumors before about it getting purchased, but I think it's got the brand name. It needs some technological, oomph behind it, but I think that will do it as well. So from a corporate standpoint or from the business standpoint, I could see companies setting up in virtual incubators. One of the things that frustrates me to no end is that I'm here in Pennsylvania in deer hunting country, and everybody out in Silicon Valley is doing like really cool stuff. And man, if I lived in Silicon Valley, how cool would that be? So I believe that they're going to set up virtual incubators. So there will be offices, virtual offices in here of entrepreneurs who are working in technology, all integrating in the same space, so that we can share ideas, that we can share thoughts, and then we'll have these spaces where I can team up with another virtual entrepreneur who's from Silicon Valley or India or wherever, and we can prototype and work on a project together in our own private room. And then we can bring in a potential client and we can show them. So there's going to be an entire thought marketplace in the virtual world set up so that people can work side by side, shoulder to shoulder on technology projects and gain that, and this is an overused word, but gain that synergy of working together. And so I really believe that in 5 years, somebody's going to develop that type of space, and big companies are going to want there because they're going to want to grab the innovations, because big companies don't innovate, they just buy small companies. Entrepreneurs are going to want to be there because they'll be able to create new products and have an instant audience with a larger company. And then people that want to consult and work in that space are going to be there. It's going to be a whole ecosystem. There'll be intellectual property lawyers in there. There will be intellectual property marketing firms. I mean, there will be all kinds of things, those kind of stuff. So that's how I see it.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's open it up for Q&A. So please, let's have the first question on the local chat. And Dr. Kapp, you can see the question on the local chat, and please feel free to respond as you see fit. Can we please have the first question in local chat? Here we go. How do we clearly show return on investment of virtual world to stakeholders and potential clients?
Right, so the way to show ROI is first figure out what the stakeholders want and what do they value. So if we just set up a virtual world just because virtual worlds are cool and neat and interesting, no good. We need to set up a virtual world to solve a specific business problem. The problem is lack of collaboration, the problem is rapid prototyping, the problem is training people who are geographically dispersed. Doesn't matter what the problem is. Set up a virtual world to solve a specific problem first. Once you do that, then it's very easy to show the ROI. If you just bring in a virtual world just to bring in a virtual world, it becomes very difficult. So solve a real business problem with the virtual intervention.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's have the next question, please. Let's have the next question in the local chat, please. All right, while we're waiting for this, let's go to the question that we have. How do you assess these new virtual models like the Quest?
I think we go back to some research technologies. You pre and post test individuals who go through the quest and find out their opinions and attitudes. So, for example, at Stanford, they did a study where they tested people's perceptions of old folks, and then they actually had these young folks who gave their stereotypes of older people, and then put them into an aging avatar, and then they assessed their attitudes toward aging afterwards, and found out that a lot of the original stereotypes that they had were broken down. Another study showed people avatars of themselves aging. So first, before they did this, they asked, how likely are you to invest in your future? So all these 20-somethings were like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna, my future's too far away. Then they showed those 20-somethings an avatar of them aging, and then later on they said, how likely are you to invest? They were much more likely to invest afterwards. So that's a pure comparison study. So that's a good way to evaluate the effectiveness, by pre and post testing individuals. And same thing with performance measures. Pre-test the performance measure, then do the virtual intervention, then post test it.
Excellent. So I'm afraid this is all the time we have for Q&A, but I do want to make sure that the audience knows that all the questions that you have submitted, we will definitely try to put those in the notes at the website so people can think about those questions and at least know what people are thinking about. At this point, I want to end the interview. I want to thank Dr. Kapp. Thank you so much for taking the time out. This has been intellectually stimulating. Has given us a lot of insights about what to expect currently in virtual worlds and in the future. So please, a big round of applause for Dr. Karl Kapp. Thank you for the business group who has put together this phenomenal event. I want to thank the support team for providing the infrastructure advice. This event doesn't happen without a solid team, and I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the audience for taking the time out for being here. And I want to make sure that we know about a few websites. KarlKapp.com is Dr. Kapp's website. And for an example of a solid business, virtual world business that's running currently, please look at 2b3d.net. That is Randy Hinrich's company, and they have done some phenomenal work. And that's it. Thank you so much. This was brought to you by University of Washington's iSchool Virtual World Certification Program, and we're looking forward to using Learning in 3D book in our next few courses as we design and implement solutions in Second Life. Thank you so much, everybody.